Hi, this is Amy Gant. I'm the managing broker for our Fayetteville, Henry County, and Griffin offices. And today we're going to talk about our financing exhibits. And we're going to begin with the conventional loan contingency. The first thing I want to point out is all of our exhibits have a blank where you will fill in A, B, or C. Amendments are typically numbered 1, 2, or 3. And exhibits are A, B, and C. So make sure these letters correspond with the letters that you've listed in your purchase and sale agreement where you've referenced these exhibits. Whenever you do your purchase and sale agreement, we hope that your buyer has already been pre-approved with a lender of their choice. You can always contact your home services lending loan officer for pre-approval letters, and they can also give you an estimate of fees, which I highly recommend whenever you're working on your financing exhibits. So we're going to start at the very beginning. The first thing you're going to have is your actual offer date. Then we're going to have the property. Your property address, this will be your number, your street number, your city. Georgia's pre-printed for you, followed by your zip code. And then we're going to get into what I call the important stuff, which is going to be the type of loan they're doing. Now remember, this one is for the conventional loan contingency. So we're going to start with box A, and there's several types of loans you can do through conventional, but we're going to go through the most common. So typically, the loan amount could be anywhere from 95% on down to any amount they want to borrow. So for this particular exhibit, we're going to say that they're putting 20% down. So we're going to be financing 80% of the purchase price, and that would go in this box here. And we're going to go today and click on this one and say that our terms are going to be for 30 years. And remember, your lender can tell you exactly what this will be. And then your interest rate. So your lender should have an interest rate on that estimate or the pre-approval they give you. And if you go a little bit higher, that's okay too, but we want to have something close. For today's purposes, we're going to say our interest rate is 4.25%. Now, there are several types of loan products out there, so don't get confused. We're not lenders. We want to make sure the buyer has already spoken with someone about their mortgage. So there are fixed loans, there are adjustable rates, and there are still some interest onlys out there too, but most common for us lately have been fixed rates. And as long as this is coming from an actual lending institution, this is going to be an institutional source of loan. Now, if you've heard of an 80-20 loan or a 90-5, this is where you'd go into Section B. We don't use this one as much, but if we were doing maybe a 80-10, if we were wanting to avoid the PMI on the front end, then maybe we'd do 80% in Section A, and then in Box B, we were also obtaining a second mortgage at 10%. That would likely have a higher rate, but again, consult your loan officer for more details about that one. So now, moving down to Section 2, the use of a particular mortgage lender. We always want to have a name of a lender in this box. Now, they can change lenders at any point, but for my own purposes, because I like to do things in-house, I typically put the name of our home services lending officer here. Now, it's very important that you take the time to actually read your financing contingency because the buyer may have a lot of questions with that. I am going to jump ahead to Section 5 because this is the section that can really protect your buyer's earnest money. Now, it's very common in our market for our financing contingency period. This is the buyer shall have blank days from the binding agreement date to determine if the buyer actually has the ability to obtain the loan described above. Some people come in here and put 2 or 3 days. Don't do that. I recommend putting at least 21 days here. We see it as low as 14 days. We see as many as 30 days. Again, hopefully by now, you've had a conversation with your buyer's lender and they can give you an idea of how long they think it will take to get that loan fully approved. So for our purposes today, we're going to put 28 days. Then we move on to page 2. Section 6 actually addresses your loan denial letter. A lot of buyers think, well, if I get denied for any reason, I can get my earnest money back. This paragraph actually addresses the reasons why they would get their earnest money back or why they might not get it back. And so they can read this thoroughly and get most of those questions answered here. The seller does have the right to request updates and information as proof that the buyer is actually applying for the loan they told them they were going to apply for. I want to move down to paragraph 10. And again, I recommend that you read everything in between. But our appraisal contingency, by now you've probably heard some really interesting stories about appraisals. So we want to make sure that your buyer is fully protected with this contingency. So we want to give plenty of time, and keep in mind you and your client can't actually order this appraisal. This is done by a third-party company that the lender will contact. So I would never recommend an appraisal contingency to be less than 14 days. But since for contract purposes here, we've added 28 days for our financing contingency, I'm going to make this one 21 days. But just know in my market, 14 to 21 is pretty standard. So what this paragraph talks about is that the buyer will have the right to have the home appraised. If the home does not come in at or higher than the purchase price, then the buyer and their agent can submit an amendment to the sales price. And basically, this is a request for price reduction. And at this point, this is fully negotiable. So the seller can either agree to the new price, the buyer cannot ask for a price lower than the appraised price, but they can negotiate it. And if the seller refuses to reduce the sales price to the new appraised price, then the buyer and the seller can terminate the contract, and the buyer should be entitled to their earnest money back. So after carefully explaining all of this to your buyer, then your buyer is ready to sign. And again, this is the easy part. We have your buyer's signature. Make sure you do print their name or have them to print their name, because sometimes it's very difficult to read their signatures. And then, of course, easy mistake here, but make sure that you remember to sign your name here as well. Now, I want to go just on a side note. If you're sending this exhibit over with a purchase and sale agreement and your seller sends over a counteroffer, remember, sometimes sellers will forget to sign this exhibit. So I just want to jump ahead. If you send this over and you have a binding counteroffer, meaning all parties have agreed to it, then it is stated on the counteroffer that the counteroffer, the purchase and sale agreement, and all exhibits have been accepted. So if you've missed a seller's signature there, it's actually okay. However, the lender may still require them to go back and sign that. So just want to avoid some confusion as you're getting started writing your contract. So after you've completed all of this, along with your other documents, make sure you load this into your zip forms, let your office administrator know, and good luck with your contract.